Hi everyone, Nancy Leffler of Being with Grief. This week's blog was about everyday grief. And in the chapter of my The Alchemy of Grief, Your Journey to Wholeness, I talked about the realization that I had after I had been on my grief journey for a while that grief is a lifelong journey. I used to think that grief visited us only when a loved one died. And what I came to find out along my grief journey is that grief visits us whenever we go through a traumatic experience, when we lose a job, or when our health changes, when we don't get a job that we thought would change our lives. And really, anytime our lives don't turn out the way that we thought they would or the way that we wanted them to, the loss of a dream. I also realized that even when we go through changes that we wanted, like a move or a retirement, we still need to grieve what went before, where we're coming from, before we can fully step into where we're going. So I began to see that grief occurs in our everyday lives all the time. Even a little thing like being late for a meeting used to bring up feelings of anxiety for me, and I came to look at those as grief. Little grief, but grief nonetheless. So what would happen if we cultivated resources, tools to be able to meet our grief when it arises in our lives? What if we're able to be mindful when we miss that meeting and be present and see what the message is there for us, and have breathing techniques or a wide variety of other resources that are available to be able to meet that grief so we don't carry that with us. Early in our marriage, we during our first pregnancy, we planned a completely different birth experience than we ended up having because we were in a car accident when I was 9.5 months pregnant. So we ended up with a C-section rather than a natural childbirth. And that was grief. So what if I had known how to meet that grief at that point instead of carrying that with me? Well, I found out that when Leah died, it sort of broke open my life, and all of the grief that I had had for the 38 years before that time, or 45 years before that time, came up clamoring for attention. And that's what makes our grief journeys feel even more overwhelming, because we're not facing just the grief, not that it's just the grief of the loss of our loved one, but all that other grief is there with it, and it feels even more overwhelming than it is. That's one of the things that I help my clients with. I help them to find resources that work for them so that they can meet their grief whenever it shows up in their lives, so they can fully participate in their lives again and become the people that they are meant to be. I'd love to have a conversation with you if this is calling to you.